He was born into a China that was changing faster than most of its people could keep up with, a nation shifting from ideology to industry, from ration coupons to market signals. Yu Xiaoping's story begins not in the glass towers of Shanghai or the boardrooms of Shenzhen, but in the factories and provincial towns where practical skills mattered more than pedigree. It is a story of steady work, technical smarts, and the sort of long game that rewards patience. The transformation of a factory manager into the founder of one of China's most influential chemical and fiber empires. Yu Xiaoping was born in January 1958 in Wenzhou, a coastal city in southeast China known for its merchants and entrepreneurs. Wenzhou's culture, a blend of stubborn independence and commercial savvy, would leave a mark on him. He entered adulthood during a period of enormous upheaval and opportunity. As China gradually opened up, old state-run factories needed managers who could combine technical knowledge with a newfound attention to market demand. Young, observant, and technically trained, Yu seized the moment. His formal education was modest but practical. He studied economics at the China University of Geosciences, a choice that gave him a foothold in both technical thinking and the basics of market logic, an unusual combination in a generation that was still learning to reconcile engineering rigor with the incentives of a market economy. That blend of skills, an engineer's eye, and an economist's sense for allocation would become a repeating theme throughout his career. Yu's early career was rooted in the plastics and fiber workshops of Ruiyang, where he worked his way from a technical post into management. He served as a vice director at Ruiyang No. 7 plastic factory and later as director of Ruiyang No. 10, roles that taught him two things that would shape his future business philosophy. First, the importance of process. The small adjustments on the factory floor that yield big improvements in product quality and cost. And second, the power of relationships with suppliers, local governments, and the growing pool of private entrepreneurs in Zhejiang province. Those relationships would later become the scaffolding on which his company grew. In the early 1990s, amid China's economic liberalization, Yu Xiaoping founded Huafon Group. What began as a small industrial operation soon focused on a single, lucrative niche: synthetic fibers and polyurethane products. Huafon specialized in spandex and related materials, components invisible to most consumers but indispensable to countless industries, from textiles and fashion to automotive interiors and industrial adhesives. By concentrating on a high-demand, technically demanding product, you found a pathway to outsized margins and steady, recurring revenue. The genius of Yu's approach was not a single leap of innovation, but a disciplined layering of advantages. He invested in manufacturing precision and quality control at a time when many rivals were cutting corners to chase volume. He built tightly integrated supply chains so that Huafon could source raw materials efficiently and pass savings along to customers. And he diversified smartly. Huafon expanded beyond spandex into polyurethane, metals, finance, logistics, and trade, businesses that at first glance seem unrelated, but which together reduced the company's exposure to cyclical demand in any one sector. That diversification was not scattershot. It was strategic vertical and horizontal integration designed to make Huafon both resilient and nimble. There are moments in every entrepreneur's life when a small decision compounds into a defining advantage. For Yu Xiaoping, one such moment came with an early bet on quality control systems. Instead of seeing quality as a cost center, he treated it as a competitive moat. Huafon's packaging, fiber uniformity, and chemical stability were superior to many domestic competitors, and international buyers noticed. Over time, those buyers, foreign brands and industrial customers who demanded consistency, began to favor Huafon, allowing the company to move beyond local markets and compete internationally. That shift in customer base accelerated Huafon's growth and helped transform it into an export powerhouse. But business success is rarely just technical. It requires people who can manage scale, negotiate with officials, and build a corporate culture that survives through both boom times and shocks. By all accounts, you combined a low-key personal style with an uncompromising focus on results. He was the kind of leader who still visited production lines, spoke with engineers, and insisted on walking the shop floor rather than relying solely on reports. That presence sent a clear message. The company's competitive edge came from its processes, and those processes required hands-on leadership. Those visits also reinforced a corporate culture that prized continuous improvement over flashy pronouncements. As Huafon scaled, two financial mechanisms turned industrial success into personal fortune. First, the company's retained earnings and reinvestments allowed it to expand capacity at a faster clip than competitors relying on external capital. Second, public listings and market recognition, along with the rising valuation of Chinese industrial firms during the last 2 decades, converted the value of those reinvested assets into liquid wealth. Through careful governance and strategic shareholdings, Yu and his family captured the lion's share of the upside. Over time, that accretion of value elevated Yu to billionaire status, a label that reflects both the company's industrial clout and the asset value conversion happening across China's corporate landscape. Anyone who builds a chemical empire has had to reckon with cycles: raw material prices that spike, environmental regulations that tighten, and global trade frictions that can squeeze margins overnight. Huafon weathered these cycles by doubling down on efficiency and by moving into adjacent businesses that offset cyclical dips. For example, when raw material costs climbed, the company leaned on its logistics and trading arms to source alternative inputs or to hedge exposure. When domestic demand softened, export channels helped smooth sales. In short, resilience was engineered into the company's structure, not simply hoped for. There are also quieter human stories behind the numbers. Employees who joined Huafon in the 1990s often describe a company that felt more mission-driven than many state enterprises of the past. Where earlier factories were places of rote labor, Huafon cultivated engineering teams rewarded for problem solving. The anecdote often told by mid-level managers is that you would personally recognize shop floor innovators, the technician who reduced waste by a tiny adjustment, or the engineer who improved line speed without sacrificing quality, and those small recognitions accumulated into a deep loyalty. Businesses often talk about human capital, but in Huafon's case, the phrase captured real relationships and a repetitive pattern. See a problem, empower the person closest to it to fix it, and reward the outcome. That ethos helped Huafon scale without the kind of institutional friction that sinks many fast-growing firms. This is how employees and former colleagues characterize the culture in profiles and interviews. Yu's ascent also mirrors the larger economic story of Zhejiang province and the Wenzhou region, where private entrepreneurship blossomed from small shops into global supply chains. In the 1980s and 1990s, Zhejiang's entrepreneurs built businesses by paying attention to customers and mastering exports. They were practical, export-oriented, and fiercely competitive. Yu's work ethic and business choices are best understood against that backdrop. He was not attempting to revolutionize consumption, he was building industrial capability, durable, repeatable, and scalable. That industrial focus meant Huafon could supply both domestic giants and international brands, becoming a backbone supplier for sectors that needed reliable synthetic fibers and chemicals. By the time Huafon's reach extended into finance and logistics, he had become more than a factory owner. He was an industrialist with an ecosystem. The logic behind moving into finance was straightforward. If you're building factories and trading materials, having financial arms that can underwrite working capital or extend credit can both speed growth and reduce dependence on external financiers. Logistics lines ensured product reliability. A shipment that arrives late can be more damaging than a small manufacturing defect. And metal and trade interests hedged against demand swings in apparel or construction. Collectively, these moves created a company less vulnerable to single market downturns and better positioned to capitalize on new opportunities. There's an important lesson in the way Yu managed risk. He treated volatility as a design constraint. Rather than assuming smooth growth, his teams engineered flexibility into production lines and into the corporate portfolio. That meant lean inventories in some cycles, focused capacity expansions in others, and an executive attention to cash flows and credit terms that many industrial peers overlooked. In an economy where access to credit and regulatory favor can be decisive, such financial discipline is a competitive advantage. And when the market rewarded industrial stability with higher valuations, that discipline translated into personal wealth. People who follow Chinese industry like to ask, how do you measure influence? For Yu Xiaoping, influence is visible in two ways. First, through Huafon's technical footprint. The company's products are inputs to thousands of supply chains and end up, quietly, almost invisibly, in clothing, furniture, and industrial goods around the world. Second, through institutional roles. Yu has served in leadership positions across industry associations that shape standards and practices in the chemical and textile sectors. That combination of market share and institutional voice gives him a veto on certain industry directions and a platform to shape technical standards and environmental practices. No success story is without controversy or challenge. The chemical and fiber industries in China have faced scrutiny for environmental impacts, and Huafon has navigated regulatory pressure and the need to modernize facilities as standards rose. Yu's response has generally been to invest in cleaner production technologies and to emphasize process optimization that reduces waste. These moves both improved Huafon's environmental footprint and protected its license to operate, a pragmatic response that reflects the company's broader philosophy of solving problems with engineering and capital rather than rhetoric. As the world's demand for technical textiles grows, from performance sportswear to automotive applications and medical supplies, companies like Huafon are well positioned. The cynic might say the real value of such firms is one more step removed from consumer glamour. The realist sees their importance in supply chains that are harder to replicate and therefore more valuable. For Yu Xiaoping, the payoff of decades in manufacturing mastery is twofold: a company with durable industrial capability and a personal fortune that reflects the steady accumulation of value in those capabilities. Forbes and other wealth indexes record that accumulation, but the fuller story is about competence, timing, and the particular institutional grit of Zhejiang's industrial culture. In quieter moments, Yu is described as unshowy, a leader who prefers the machinery room to the limelight. That temperament matters. Billionaires come in many styles: the showman, the investor, the visionary technologist. Yu is the industrialist, the problem solver who turns inputs into dependable outputs. His wealth is not built on a single disruptive product or a viral platform. It is the outcome of iterative improvements, strategic diversification, and a respect for the slow alchemy of manufacturing. For audiences used to tech billionaire narratives, his story is a useful corrective. Sometimes, empire is built by compounding small advantages over decades. If there is a takeaway for entrepreneurs watching from anywhere in the world, it's this: identify a technically demanding, persistently needed input, invest in process quality, cultivate relationships across supply, finance, and regulation, and treat volatility as a parameter to engineer around. Yu Xiaoping's life is a blueprint for industrial entrepreneurship in a large, fast-changing economy, not glamorous, but profoundly effective. It is a reminder that behind many consumer conveniences lie people and factories that scaled patiently and precisely, day after day. Yu Xiaoping's journey, from plant management in Ruyan to the chairmanship of Huafon Group and a place on global billionaire lists, is both specifically Chinese and universally instructive. It's a narrative about leveraging technical skill in a market economy, about the quiet power of supply chains, and about the long horizon needed to translate industrial competence into generational wealth. For viewers, his story offers neither instant glamour nor quick lessons. Instead, it offers a deeper narrative about how industry, when managed with care and discipline, can create lasting value.